Hello and welcome to the James Granstrom Podcast, Super Soul Model Series. And this week I'm speaking to Adam Stansbury. Adam has been on the show 2 times before, and this week we're talking about his new book, The Journey to the Center of Your Soul. Welcome back to the show, my mate Ads. Adam, welcome back. How are you, my friend? You doing well?
Hey, brother. Yeah, good to be here, mate. Thanks for having me back again.
It's great
Third
to have
time
you
to
back.
charm.
Yeah, this one's going to be real magic. Here we go. Let's see how this is going to unfold. So basically, you've had a bit of a metamorphosis since you come on the show again. It seems that every time we come and connect and speak with one another, something new has evolved. And since we've spoken last, you've written another book. So what's happening and what's been happening in your life? I mean, let's just give Adam a bit of an origin about what he's doing currently. Adam is an author of this new book, The Journey to the Center of Your Soul, and he's a life journey facilitator with a mission to help others reconnect with their sacred life journey and the magic within. Now that sounds really beautiful, but what does that all mean?
Well, author.
There we go,
So I
author.
wrote a book.
Beautiful
Um,
cover, mate. Beautiful cover. I'm looking forward to
um,
reading this.
so the journey to the center of your soul. I'll give you a bit of a background, actually, on the journey of the book itself. One of the books that I've got a lot of inspiration from over the last couple of years is Conversations with God by Neil Donald Walsh. And there's one specific point in that book where God talks about the 3 different ways we relate to life through our environment, to other people, and to ourselves. And then it went on to some other passages. And I remember hearing that passage at one point, and it really kind of landing for me. And I was going on a walk around the farm I was living on in Ibiza at the time, and I remember just parking it to the back of my mind and getting on with things. But it inspired me. And then in September last year, a friend of mine had sent me a podcast on a couple who were consciously uncoupling. And at the time, I was going through a pretty difficult breakup myself. And the concepts that they talked about on the podcast triggered it's almost like they joined some of the dots of the ideas that were floating around in my aura without much structure. It's like some of the concepts that they talked about in the podcast just suddenly enabled everything to just tie up, the dots to join up. And I got off this podcast and I sat there and I got an A4 sheet of paper out, and it's like everything kind of channeled through me. The sections, the 3 sections, the main sections in the book, the environment, others, and you, and then all of the subheadings within those sections, I wrote down like in the space of about an hour and a half one evening. And I then just turned around to my housemate at the time, Laurie, and said, mate, I'm going to start writing a new book tomorrow. And that was literally how it began. And because I'd written a book before, Plant Powered, that came out a year before, I knew what I needed to do in order to write a book, right? So for me, the non-negotiable is always this. Once I say I'm going to write a book, it's like I make sure that my non-negotiable every day is 30 minutes at the start of every day with a coffee, laptop open. I'll do my meditation, cold shower beforehand, sit down with my laptop open, and I'll write for half an hour. And now sometimes only 200 words comes out, you're blocked and not much comes through. And then at other times you're totally inspired and you write 1,500 words kind of thing. But either way, you've shown up every day, you've sat down and you've chipped away. And I like to see writing as sculpting with words.
Absolutely, mate. Absolutely. It's a lovely way of saying that. I like the way you talked about your habits. I like the way that your non-negotiable is turning up, doing the writing. This new book feels as though it's sort of come through. It's been channeled in some way. You got an inspiration. You got a spark. There's a really lovely story I remember because I'm always spotting patterns of what people do. And I was watching the Graham Norton show a few years ago, and I'm always interested to see what the guests emerge with, what they say. And I remember Lenny Kravitz was being interviewed by Graham Norton, and he said, yeah, one night when I was working on the Hunger Games movie, I think he was in episode 3 of the Hunger Games. I've never ever seen it, but Lenny was one of the actors, and he goes, I just suddenly got this download to record an album. And it was like he knew he needed to be on set at like 6 a.m. and this started happening about midnight. And so he said he kind of got this download of like writing a new album, of which he was there to promote. And of course, like the Hunger Games film, right? And so Graham was like asking the question. It's like, well, so did you go to sleep that? Did you go to sleep that night? And he went, no. He goes, I just had to receive and make that album as it was being downloaded to me, you know. And we could change that word download to channel or being streamed, because we are all streaming. We're all streaming at some level, and when we're tuned in, when it comes, you've got to be receptive. And that just sounds exactly like what you were saying with the books and the categories and the chapters and breaking it up into three. And of course you've had experience of writing a book before. But when he was asked the next question by Graham, which this is the bit I really liked, he goes, so, you know, why didn't you just go to sleep and let it go? He goes, because you never know when the next album's going to come. So Lenny was astute enough and shrewd enough and had enough experience to go, hey, when things are being downloaded and you're receptive, get it down, write it, you know. And that's what came out. And he said it was very authentic. It was very, you know, it was a real joy to write. And of course he was a bit tired going on to set the next day, but you know, he had some creative download in the middle of the night, and he's got himself like 9 songs on an album. So I thought that was amazing. And I love that sort of parallel about you listening to a podcast and then getting an ignition from your soul, ignition for an idea, which became this beautiful book that you're talking about. So just tell us about what this book's really all about then, my friend.
So yeah, the catalyst of it, really the main catalyst for it was this breakup that I'd gone through. And through that breakup, it made me look at what I was learning, what it was showing me about myself, rather than getting lost in the detail of what the other person's doing or what's happening and woe is me. It's just like, well, what's life showing me here about myself, you know? And it came back to the concept of, you know, how we only know ourselves because of what we relate to around us, right? So if you and I were in a vacuum with nothing else in it, or no one else in it, we wouldn't know who we were, because we wouldn't have anything to relate to, because it's in relating to another or to another thing that we get to understand who we are, what we like, and what we're all about. And so the book takes you on a journey through, I call it inner earth, right? And the inner earth is made up of 3 rings, and the outer ring is the environment, how you relate to your environment through your sensory perceptions, the senses that you can see and feel, and also the unseen sort of senses, the intuition as well. Then the next ring in is your relation, how you relate to others. So being your friendships, your family, and of course romantic relationships, and all of the kind of the challenges and the beauty and the magic that comes from how we relate to other people and what they're ultimately showing us about ourselves. It's not necessarily about them, it's about how their being is helping us to define who we are and who we want to be. And then ultimately that leads you to the core, which is your relationship with yourself, and how you choose to show up in the world, how authentic you are, you know, vulnerability, and it taps into all of these different areas. And it's by going on a journey through these 3 layers of relating that you get to build up a much deeper understanding of who you are and who you want to be.
Cool. And I like the way you've done the rings and how it kind of has this sort of magical parallel with like Lord of the Rings, and you've called it Inner Earth. So it sounds very similar to, you know, The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings. So are you a big fan of that, or is that just something that's obviously some intent on there?
I would say I'm a big fan of those movies. I'm a big fan of, it's really Joseph Campbell's also work about the hero's journey, and those kind of particular movies are really deeply entrenched in that concept. I love a story or a movie, you know, with sort of central characters, but that they go off into unknown territory, unknown lands, and it's through this journey, through these different realms and these different experiences and circumstances, that they get to build, that, you know, they grow, their characters grow, they become stronger, different areas of their personalities comes through because of these experiences. And I love that kind of concept. And so I wanted to kind of write something that sort of really tapped into that mystical side of
the
human
human psyche, the human paradigm as well. I mean,
Mm,
I love the way that films and stories always can help us relate. The reason why we love them so much is because for hopefully 2 hours or so, you can have an escape, and you
mm,
can escape and live vicariously through the characters.
mm.
But I suspect in your book, and correct me if I'm wrong, the main and central character is you in Journey to the Center of Your Soul. And have you done many sort of parallels about other characters in this book, about how they can relate to things in popular culture that people can kind of relate to, very much like the hero's journey? If we're looking at Joseph Campbell, we're looking at Luke Skywalker, as in beginning as the novice, and then he goes on the journey of learning and training with a mentor, and then having to have adversity and then come back as a master, succeeding, and then the cycle starts again. So I suspect in this character with your work, are you acting like the mentor, acting like the Obi-Wan Kenobi, acting like that type of character, the mentor, to help people guide them through the tough so that they can master themselves and then come back to tell their tale?
Yeah, I mean, I'm the main protagonist in the story, but it's I've used my own personal experience as the basis for what I've learned, and that's what I'm sharing. And I've kind of woven that through the book. It's not solely based just on my experience, but I call on certain life experiences that I've had at different times to teach or to relay certain points about certain situations, such as when I went through sort of life-threatening surgery back in like 2006, had my large intestine removed, the inner strength that brought through in me, the connection with the kind of warrior archetype that brought through in me. So I use that kind of story in terms of my own life to relay a certain point. And then of course, going through a relationship breakup like this, and what's that shown me about who I want to be, and how easy it is to lose yourself in relating to another, forget who you are, to fall off your own path. And then once you break up, you get an opportunity once again to define who you are and what makes you tick. So yes, I'm using my own life experience to relay a lot of the points, and that's what made the book for me it was so easy to write, because this is really based on my life experience and my kind of, I guess, insight and wisdom to date through writing books, through bodybuilding, through illness, through debt, through divorce, through breakup.
We all have colourful lives, but the more colourful it is, the grander the story. And I suspect that the easier it is to try and help other people heal on their own journeys as well.
Yeah, and I think people relate to. It's easy to relate to someone who's been through stuff, who's not just regurgitating something that's in a book or a film, but is able to kind of look at the concepts that are talked about in books and films and stuff, but actually also share their own perspective, and I think be vulnerable and authentic in sharing my own story, so that others can sort of understand that they're not alone. That we're all going through it. This journey through life is not an easy one, and so you're doing well, and you're here, and you're right on time.
Yeah,
I
it
think.
must be quite a humbling experience, mate, when you're writing the book, bringing up your own life stories, your own life experiences that have been challenging. How much compassion sort of arises through you when you're actually trying to use this as a force for good, to say, hey, listen, like, you can have a challenge, but there are ways through it.
Well, it was an extremely cathartic process, because what I found was, as I was writing the book, so because I'd already written out the sections and the subheadings, I literally just every day systematically sat down and I went through each one, and so one day, it'd be on a certain topic, and that would be the subheading that I would write on on that specific day. And it, much of the time it just so happened that what I was going through in terms of the breakup was bringing up very similar teachings and lessons and things for me to look at. So as it was all unfolding for me, I was able to almost use my lived in immediate live experience to sort of, I guess, again, channel the information for the book, the lesson of the day almost, and in that, for me, it was almost like, it was very healing. And I at one point I also sort of said to myself, do you know what, I don't even know if this is going to be a book, and you know what, I'm okay with that. All I'm going to focus on is sitting down every day, showing up, and allowing whatever needs to come through, and then let's just see what happens at the end, and so that was probably quite early on in the process I decided to do that, because it's quite easy to get wrapped up in the end result or your expectation of what this is meant to be. For me, it just felt like a really important process for me to be going on in that moment. Obviously, the initial thought was, right, I'm going to write a book. And then early on, I just thought, you know what, I'm just going to let go of what this needs to be and how it needs to look and turn out, and just be present with what's coming through me and learn from it, and help myself out really as well at the same time.
How does that differ, that sort of mentality or that mindset differ from the old you? Because you're saying, I'm just trying to allow it to flow. I'm just going to try and let it be. I don't know if it's going to be a book. When any of us are trying to do things, there's a certain level of, I've got to try and control this. I've got to organize this. I've got to put it in its structure and its place. That's what we've been taught. But, what you're saying is that you're kind of willing to let go of these sort of attachments, because for me, this is a beautiful way of becoming an evolved human being, because it's not easy and it requires self-discipline, self-control, self-awareness. I've obviously had enough experience to go, hang on a minute, I'm not going to push this, I'm not going to force this, because if I do, it could go backward. I know I've had that experience so many times trying to set up podcasts, interviews, just writing material, day-to-day living experience. You want things to be a certain way, but when they're not a certain way, you suffer or you get the backlash of stress or whatnot. So how did you get to this little mindset? Because it's a beautiful example of how to let things be no matter what they are without pushing it, and yet still having a beautiful product of something that can be uplifting and enlightening at the same time. What was your mindset, and how do you feel as though you've evolved, through the writing of this?
Well, like I think I was a personal trainer from 2009, and I did some fitness modeling and bodybuilding shows. And at that point in my life, I was in a very disciplined, very structured approach to how I moved my body, how I trained. And of course, when you're doing a show or something like that, you do have to have a certain amount of structure. But it also affected my personality. I think back then I found it hard to be flexible with life, and I think I got to a point where I needed to break out of that. And then the journey for me with plant medicine began in sort of 2014, and my journey with psychedelics and plant medicine, ayahuasca, they really tap into that. When you're in the midst of a challenging psychedelic experience, there's nothing else that you can do apart from let go.
You have to fully embrace what's happening. Not that I've had it, but I
just to allow the experience to flow through you and know that this too shall pass. And the experience is just such a great metaphor for life. And I think that's what they provide. They provide good platforms and tools to help you navigate life with more of this. Okay, I'm just going to let this go now, because hanging on to it too tight is causing me more suffering. Sure. You get more of that in a psychedelic experience, if it's not going the way you want it to and you hang on a little bit. So I think that really helped me a lot. And so when I was going through this particular experience, I just knew that was just felt like the right course of action for me to take. I knew what was coming through me that was of value, but whether it was a book, a course, or what, I stepped away from needing to really know that in the moment.
I
Yeah.
just wanted to touch base and just go back onto something that, I spot patterns. That's what I do. I've been thinking about looking at patterns, whether they're in people's personal lives or in the world or whatever. I just spot patterns and I see evolution of how things come into place. And when you start to understand the metaphysical reasons and energetic patterns, as I've done just through years of meditation, it's just like things become very clear to me now. And when I knew you back in 2009 from or even earlier than that, from the modeling circuit, it's a lot earlier than that, isn't it? It's got to be like 2005 or 6 or 7 or something like that, any one of those years. But when I was seeing you on the modeling circuit, you hadn't yet got into bodybuilding, but then by the time you moved into Burntwood Lane, that's when you were full in on it in Earlsfield, southwest London. And I remember when I was just going around making music at one of our friends' house, one of our best mates' house, you were like putting the steaks and the chicken in the freezer. You were absolutely regimental. And I know that I'd done something similar to that a few years prior when I first started modeling in like 2000, 2001. I was getting my 5 meals in a day, of which 2 were like Myoplex shakes with 50 grams of protein. But now you were really going for it. I'd seen like a level of focus that was unbridled, and unparalleled. I was like, this guy is just not going to let up. And there I was playing the ukulele with Jimbo or making tunes, or like we were making tunes in the studio and you were putting all your freezer food away and then you come in for a song and, have a good old sing song. But I remember thinking to myself, look at the level of focus there. That's wonderful. But simultaneously is that in bodybuilding, what I've noticed with looking at like a masters of bodybuilding, there's a certain level of inflexibility that comes from the rigid strength pushing in the body.
Yeah, from a physical point of view and a mental point of view.
And a mental point of view, because you have to be so rigid with your thinking. You have to be, I'm going to train like 5 hours a day. I've got to make sure I get, I don't know, 5,000 calories in a day or whatever it is. I mean, so that requires absolute focus. So how did you break out of that bodybuilding shell of strength and rigidity to become flexible? Because a lot of people never do that, never get there. And then suddenly to break out of that shell, have a metamorphosis. And then a few years later, you have another metamorphosis with this book, the Journey of Your Soul. So it's beautiful to see that we can keep having a new metamorphosis regularly in our lives. It's almost as if you're getting a radical rebirth over and over again. So, what helps you break out of that shell in your experience?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, like I said, definitely plant medicine and exploring that sort of the psychedelic side really cracked me open, from I think a mental and spiritual perspective. And then I discovered from a physical perspective, again, I knew that not only did I need to kind of break free of the rigid structure that was sort of around me mentally, but physically, because of the way I've been training, I felt like I needed something to make me more mobile and flexible. And yoga for me I enjoy yoga, but it doesn't kind of call me back to the mat. I get a little bit bored with yoga because it feels quite static, and I needed something that was beyond any form of static. It needed to put me in a place where I could just become like a little boy again, when I was a kid climbing trees, crawling around on the floor and not having to have any uniformed way of being or pointing, and I discovered animal flow back in, I think that was 2015, 2016 time. And animal flow is a quadruped based body weight movement practice that moves you through many different planes of movement using animalistic type forms to engage you. And so it has an amazing effect on not only your core strength, your kind of the strength and stability of all your joints, but because it's moving your body through a really dynamic plane of movement, it really taps into your levels of creativity and the way you think. And I think the way you move your body definitely is reflected in how you think, and I think the
100%, man.
the opposite is true, and so that, I think, exploring that movement practice along with the psychedelics and plant medicines, I think both of those things really help to break that open for me. And I'd just like to add that it's finding a balance, because discipline is really important, and you need a certain amount of structure to get stuff done. And I'm a fan of a process. I do love a process, and like, if you look at my life, you can see that I do love having something to aim for, and I love taking a structured approach to get there. But what I've learned now is to be much more flexible in that approach. So for me, creativity, I allow creativity to come to me, to flow through me when I'm inspired. But then when it lands, I'll take a structured, action-based approach to get it out there. And so that's how I've found a way of working with these two powers, if you like, these two dynamics, and to get stuff done. It feels to me like the most natural way that I can create from, going from free fluid inspiration into a more structured process to achieve what you want to achieve.
So having that structure, is that a new version of you, or is that an old version of you?
I think it's old, definitely.
Yeah.
But I've now, I'm now working it into my life in a way that's more flexible, that's more fluid, that's not neglecting the more inspirational, flexible side of me. That's really important, because if I get too rigid, then the fun, you start losing the fun and the joy and the play with everything. And I think fun, joy, play is creative. It's a creative process, and I think
It's a creative energy. It's a creative energy, full stop.
Just quickly, I had to go back to the point you were making about Lenny Kravitz, and also my experience with this book coming through me. You've read the book Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert. It's an amazing book on creativity, and she says in that book, she sees basically ideas as almost like clouds, and they float along to someone, and they'll land on you, and you'll get the experience of that idea. But it's up to you whether you take action on it or not. And if you don't take action on it, that will float off to someone else to create.
Love it. Yeah.
And that's exactly what Lenny instinctively knew, was like, if I don't act on this now and write this album in this moment right now, someone else is going to take this stuff. And I think that for me speaks to the collective consciousness, this web of knowledge and wisdom that we're all connected with at all times.
I'll never forget when we were in a club years ago in Leeds, and one of my best mates, who's made his transition last year, he was thinking, do you know what they need to do? I've just had an idea. They need to remix that Bruce Hornsby tune, That's Just the Way It Is. Right? So you heard that, right? Within a year, someone had remixed it, and we were in a club, another club somewhere in London this time. And then that song comes on, that's just, and George was like, and he comes up to me and goes, I can't believe it. I had that idea.
Yeah.
Yes, you had that idea, but you didn't do anything with it.
Yeah.
And so you've got to be aware of when an idea comes and then moving and acting on it. So for me, one of my ideas was, you've got to start a podcast. And yeah, I had a delay on it. If you listen back to some of my shows, I had a delay for quite a long time, but the idea kept on coming back and coming back and coming back. And eventually I took action, and it's been a really wonderful and cathartic experience, and has hopefully helped lots of people in the process. And having amazing guests such as yourself on the show. So it's great to just, when you get the idea, to act on it. It's the same when I'm having creative play, making music, whatever. I might want to remix something. I remember a year or so ago, I remixed a Phil Collins track that I'd heard. I thought, oh God, I've not heard that. I've got to remix that. So I did it. And I just, when you get an idea, however small it is, it's not about it trying to be a bestseller. It's not about it trying to make a lot of money. It's about the energy that you feel whilst you do it. Because the energy that you feel whilst you do it, if it's fun, it's playful, it's creative, it's fulfilling, it's soul fulfilling, it's satisfying, that is the currency that is thrilling for you. And out of that, people pick up on that energy, because it's the energy that's addictive of when you read something or you listen to something or you watch a movie. You know, when you watch a movie and you're just like, wow, it's the joy of the director, the joy of the actors and actresses, and the story that's all been imbued and woven and been part of the whole fabric that's made up that experience. And I can tell just by the way that you've talked about this new book that you've put your soul into it, which I know that people, if they're tuned in, will also pick up on that feeling, which will help them on their journey too.
Yeah, totally, buddy. Yeah, I mean, it's what was beautiful about writing this book was also the fact that I didn't need to do any research. You know, I didn't have to rely on anyone to do any research, because this was all coming from my own experience, and this was, you know, it was my opportunity to get down on paper how I felt life looked like to me, and because of that, it's really, you know, it's a little book, and it's low on fluff. You know, it gets to the point, and it's something I feel that anyone can read and reflect back on and go through. There's different points in here that encourages you to journal on different things, to ask your own inner questions. But yeah, because it came totally from my sort of soul, it meant that I was able to get it done and write it in such a short space of time. I started it in September and finished it in November. You know, I think 9 weeks.
That is fast. That is
You
fast.
know, it's a small book. You know, it's 22,000 words if you look at the average novel. Or my last book was 65,000, so it's like a third of the size of that. But it's a very different, you know, it's a different style of book. It's a different topic, and it came from a very different place as well. So yeah, I'm really chuffed with it. I'm really happy with it. It's kind of arrived at this start of a new phase in my life, whereas the last book I wrote came at the end of a phase. And so this one is, I feel this almost like the seeds, is sowing the seeds for my future, this one, and what I'm creating from it.
So what are the bullet points that will be the benefits for someone wanting to read this book? What are the benefits that this book will bring?
Well, the benefit, the ultimate benefit is getting to know yourself better. Like, you know, like, who am I and who do I want to be? If you can answer those questions, then you're gonna, you know, improve relationships. You're going to create more inner peace. You're going to increase your creativity. You're going to be able to live with more joy and freedom. You're going to be letting go of like old habits, old behaviors and stories that are kind of no longer serving you, that have been holding you back. You know, you're going to be able to set more healthy boundaries, because all of that stems from this place of self-love, self-knowing. This is who I am. This is what I need in this moment for myself, and being able to then, you know, state that to the world. You know, exclaim to the world, this is who I am and who I wish to be. And I think it makes our lives so much easier once we can answer that question wholeheartedly from a place of deep understanding. So the book and the content within the book are there to help get you to that point, basically.
Yeah.
Constantly asking those questions.
Is there anything else from aside from the book? Are you offering any one-to-ones? Are you offering, I know you're doing a coaching program, but are you doing group stuff? You know, what else are you offering that could potentially help someone here?
This book is also a small part of a much bigger concept that I've created which is called Inner Earth, which is an online journey, an online program. That program I started creating over a year ago, before the book, but it didn't make much sense to me at the time. There was stuff missing. I didn't know how I was going to practically turn it into some kind of coaching program. So I put it to the side. Then I went through everything I was going through, and the book came through. And then once the book finished, I realized that actually the book was the missing piece of the puzzle in terms of the Inner Earth program. And so at the start of this year, I set about creating that concept. And it's a 6-week journey online. It takes people through 5 different realms, and each of those realms represents a different area of your life. And within each of those realms, you connect with a different archetypal energy. So, for instance, in week 1, you're in the kingdom, and the kingdom represents your life, everything and everyone in it, and around it. And of course, the archetype that you connect with in week 1 is your king or your queen, which relates to, your leadership abilities. Do you bring order or create chaos? Are you a grounded presence in other people's lives? Are you able to bless and unify people? So you tap into those energies through these different realms. I use guided meditations, different connection practices. I've got movement videos, some animal flow as well, and there's a lot of great content every week. There's a lot of thought being put into it, and I'm really, really excited about it. And that, the book and the concepts within the book about how you relate to your environment, to other people, and to yourself are also carried through that journey through Inner Earth.
Fantastic. So I'll make sure everybody's got the links available. I'll have them in the show notes and the podcast notes. So make sure you have a look at Adam's links and look into his program if you feel inspired by a conversation today. Adam's done a lot of work on this, and I've had some chats with him behind the scenes, and I feel he's really onto something with this. So if you feel inspired by a conversation today, as I do always when I speak to my mate Ads, it's great to have people like you in my life, mate, and it's
likewise, brother. Likewise.
Reminded of all the magic that's happening. So just wanted to say thank you for being on the show today, and Adam Stansbury's this week's Super Soul Model. Thanks.
Thank you, brother. Thanks for having me.